Jason was driving alone one late autumn evening. The roads were nearly empty, with just the occasional car passing by under the dim glow of the streetlights. He was heading home from a long work shift, eager to get back to his warm bed. As he cruised down a desolate highway, the air outside was cold and foggy, thick enough that visibility was limited to only a few feet ahead. Suddenly, in the distance, Jason saw a figure standing by the side of the road. It was a woman, wearing a light dress that seemed out of place in the chilly weather. Her pale face and long, dark hair gave her an eerie appearance. She raised her thumb, signaling for a ride. Jason hesitated. It was odd to see anyone out here, especially this late at night, but she looked desperate. His better judgment told him to drive past, but something in him, perhaps guilt, forced him to pull over. As soon as he rolled down the window, she leaned in and asked, "Can you take me home? I live just a few miles ahead." Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, as if she were exhausted. "Sure, hop in," Jason said reluctantly. The woman got in, settling in the passenger seat without a word. Jason tried to make conversation as they drove, but she remained silent, staring straight ahead. Her face was pale, almost too pale, and there was a strange chill in the car despite the heater being on. As they drove further down the road, Jason noticed something disturbing. The rearview mirror, there was no reflection of the woman in it. His heart raced. He tried not to panic, convincing himself that it was just a trick of the light, but a growing sense of dread gripped him. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a small, run-down house at the edge of a forest. "This is my stop," she whispered. Jason exhaled a sigh of relief as she opened the door and stepped out. But as soon as she disappeared into the shadows, Jason sped off, eager to put the strange encounter behind him. The next day, curiosity got the better of him. He told a friend about the strange ride and described the house. The friend went pale. "That house burned down years ago," the friend said. "Some girl died in the fire. People say she still tries to get home." Jason's blood turned cold. Had he given a ride to the ghost of a girl who never made it home alive? Moral: always trust your instincts. Sometimes, not everything you see at night is meant to be real, and some lost souls may never find their way back. Anna and her friends had been on a road trip, a fun weekend getaway to a lakeside cabin. After an evening filled with laughter, they piled into the car for the long drive back home. Night had already fallen, and the road ahead was narrow, winding through thick, towering trees that seemed to close in around them. The first few miles were filled with the sound of music and chatter, but as they ventured deeper into the forest, a strange silence fell over the group. Anna, who was driving, noticed something odd in the rearview mirror. At first, it was just a faint flicker of light far behind them, like headlights. "Looks like someone's behind us," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. The others didn't pay much attention. But the light grew brighter, as if the car was getting closer, until it was right on their tail. Anna glanced back again, only to realize something was terribly wrong. There was no car. Just two glowing lights hovering in the air, following them closely. Her heart skipped a beat. "Guys, look," she exclaimed, pointing to the lights. The others turned around, their faces pale as they saw what she saw. The lights moved in unnatural ways, zigzagging across the road behind them, sometimes disappearing, only to reappear seconds later. "Step on it," one of her friends yelled. Anna pressed the gas pedal, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The lights followed, staying right behind them no matter how fast they went. For what seemed like hours, they drove as fast as they could, the glowing lights never once falling behind. Panic set in as the lights began to close the distance. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the lights vanished. Anna slammed on the brakes, her heart racing. The road ahead was empty. There were no headlights, no taillights, nothing to indicate that a car had ever been behind them. Shaken, they continued their drive in stunned silence. Later, they learned that the road they had driven on was infamous for strange occurrences. Many years ago, a car had crashed on that very road, and the driver had never been found. Legend had it that the ghostly lights were the spirits of lost souls, forever trying to find their way home. Moral: the road at night holds secrets that we may never fully understand. Sometimes, it's better not to look too closely at the things following you. Eric was used to long drives. As a truck driver, night shifts on lonely highways were just part of his job. He'd been on the road for hours one cold winter evening, driving through a particularly desolate stretch of highway. There were no other cars, no signs of civilization, just miles of empty road and the occasional rustle of the wind. As he drove, something in the rearview mirror caught his eye. He could have sworn he saw movement in the back seat of his truck. He glanced back but saw nothing. Shaking it off, he continued driving, but the uneasy feeling wouldn't leave him. After a while, he felt it again, that distinct sense of someone or something being in the truck with him. His heart pounded in his chest as he flicked his eyes back to the rearview mirror. There, in the faint glow of the dashboard lights, was the unmistakable outline of a figure sitting in the back seat. His breath caught in his throat. The figure was motionless, just a shadow, but its presence was undeniable. Eric's hands tightened around the steering wheel as panic surged through him. Who, or what, was in his truck? He hadn't picked anyone up, and the doors had been locked the whole time. Trying to keep calm, he pulled over to the side of the road and turned to look at the back seat. It was empty. No sign of anyone. Shaking, he turned back around, telling himself it was his mind playing tricks on him. But as he merged back onto the highway, the figure reappeared, sitting silently in the back seat. This time, he didn't dare stop. He kept driving, trying to ignore the presence looming behind him. It wasn't until he reached a truck stop hours later that the figure finally vanished, leaving Eric shaken and exhausted. The next day, Eric mentioned the encounter to another driver at the stop. The man's face darkened as he listened. "You're not the first to see something like that," he said. "This highway's known for it. Drivers report seeing passengers that shouldn't be there, ghosts of people who died in crashes along this stretch." Eric never drove that highway at night again. Moral: the road is a place of transition, where life and death sometimes meet. Stay alert, for the ghosts of the past may still be riding alongside you. These 3 night drive horror stories serve as chilling reminders that the road isn't always as empty as it seems. From Phantom Hitchhikers to Vanishing Lights and Backseat Ghosts, the darkness hides more than just the unknown, it hides the spirits of those who've never truly left. The moral of these stories is simple: be cautious, especially in the stillness of the night. Sometimes, the scariest things on the road aren't accidents or hazards, they're the memories of those who never made it home.